Just to let our viewers know, as you see on your screen, the President Prez Akufo-Addo has taken his seat at the banquet hall of the Flagstaff House. So clearly, he is a man who's been talking about punctuality. It's exactly 12:30, and he is seated at his seat, on his seat right now to speak at the moment. And you would see very shortly Mustafa Hamid, who's the Minister of Information, who will be moderating this whole encounter with the President at the banquet hall of the Flagstaff House. Will begin the whole process. So stay with us. This is just to let you know that we're bringing you every detail of what will be happening at the Flagstaff House in a few minutes. Prof.
Yes, so the measurables need information so that you can use them as evidence or means of verification to see whether what the President said is achieving them. It's a bit too early yet for very strong information to come for all the promises or the statements of intent in the manifesto.
Sure.
But a few are there for us to talk about.
So for you, I mean, generally, what are you expecting the President to talk about? I mean, talking about his 6 months in office.
Well, to me, honestly, and I think, you know, primarily I'm an economist,
Sure.
then some construction, and so on. So first I will talk about the economy.
Right.
I will expect him to talk about the economy. The manifesto he has brings to the fore some critical issues like the agriculture, industry, and so on and so forth, and even services linked with tax reductions here and there. Clearly, these are measures with specific objectives or deliverables. Yes, it is true that, again, as I said, we may not have all the information, but I would expect to hear about some of the plans. Planning is part of the whole process of policy making.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore, we want to hear what stages they have reached with the various plans, one district, one factory, which are very critical. And then it's linked with even job creation, agriculture sector, and so on. So the economy. And then when we look at the economy from the financial point of view, inflation, expectations play a big role,
Right.
but what are some of the plans he has?
A lot of them are there's a processes initiated to achieve some of these major promises. But let me just acknowledge that what you see on the screen is Mustafa Hamid, Minister of Information, addressing the press, almost telling them what exactly what should be expected. Let's go into the banquet hall of the Flagstaff House to listen to what's happening there as we speak at the moment, as you see on the screen. The President is about addressing the gathering.
For this first media encounter since I came here, I must at the outset thank members of the media, particularly the Presidential Press Corps, for the extent and depth of the coverage they have given to the activities of the presidency these last 6 months. I cannot complain about the lack of exposure of my thoughts, statements, or policies since I became president. And for that, I'm grateful to the media, and as I say, particularly to the members of the Presidential Press Corps, whose duty it is to cover the president. They should know that their work is appreciated. In so saying, I think it necessary also to record my delight at the vibrancy of the Ghanaian media. I know there are some who take issue with the media on several fronts, and even goes so far as to criticize me for my part in the repeal of the criminal libel law. For it has made the media, quote, too free, unquote. Even though I have been one of the greatest victims of the irresponsible section of the media, and I refer to those who have created an industry from spewing calumnies, falsehoods, and outright fabrications against my person, I do not regret one bit my role in repealing the old discredited law. The repeal has inspired the Ghanaian media to be one of the freest and most vibrant on the entire continent of Africa, if not in the world. I may not go as far as Thomas Jefferson when he said that, and I quote, "Were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter," unquote. But I will say that I much prefer the noisy, boisterous, sometimes scurrilous media of today to the monotonous, praise-singing, sycophantic one of yesteryear. The Ghanaian media has, in fact, enriched the nation's governance by its persistence, curiosity, and investigative skills. 11 days ago, 7th July, was exactly 6 months since I swore the oath of office as the 5th President of the 4th Republic. Needless to say, it has been an eventful 6 months. But apart from one or two brief encounters, I have not had a sustained direct engagement with the media. I believe that symbolically, this is a good time to do so. Hence my invitation for this occasion. It will enable me to share some of my thoughts on what has gone on and allow you members of the media to express your concerns and questions, if any, for my response. It is my intention to have such encounters twice a year. On 7 December 2016, the Ghanaians went to the polls and voted decisively for change. A change to advance the economic fortunes of this country and bring about improvements in their livelihoods. A change to eradicate the perception of widespread corruption in public life and enhance the quality of governance in our nation. A change to banish the specter of national demoralization and revive the spirit of confidence of the Ghanaian people. I said in my first message on the state of the nation that the times in which we live demand that all of us be in a conscious hurry to deal with the problems we face. This is what has motivated my actions till now. Halfway into my first year in office, it is good to take stock of what has happened and the way forward. This forum is not intended to give another message on the state of the nation. Neither is it to announce my achievements. It is guided rather by the principle of accountability. We, and I mean we in government and you in the media, together have a responsibility to bring the details of the governing process to the people of Ghana. They deserve to know what we are doing and why we are doing it, and how that would lead to the betterment of their lives. If the people are not kept informed or do not understand the activities of the government, then we in government and you in the media are failing in our duties. My first important task was to assemble a team of quality, capable of working to overcome my government's poor legacy and setting Ghana on the path of progress and prosperity. By 12th April, the full central government was in place, in the fastest period of time in the history of the Fourth Republic. By common consent, so as not to be seen to be blowing my own trumpet. It is regarded as being composed of some of the best persons in public life today, men and women of achievement, experience, integrity, and knowledge, together with youthful elements who are full of promise. By that date, the regional government was also in place. Again, a strong representation of competence and integrity. I must once more thank the legislature, the parliament, for the expeditious but responsible manner in which it exercised its constitutional power of approval of my nominees, notwithstanding the bizarre, incomprehensible episode of the non-existent bribery of members of Parliament's Appointments Committee. The process of constituting local government is now almost complete, with the nomination and approval of 208 out of 216 metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executives. The remaining 8, hopefully, will soon be in office. Let me use this medium to thank the relevant metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies for their vote of confidence in my nominees. I'm confident that on their part, they will work harmoniously with their assemblies. It is worth stressing that these MMDCEs will be the last batch to take office under the current system if the constitutional proposals for reform are accepted and passed. We have to expand full democracy to local government. I knew that the biggest problem we would face on coming into office would be the economy. But I can safely say that I was still shocked at the state of affairs we found. A very competent economic management team with a brilliant Vice President, Alhaji Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia, in the chair, has initiated with my support measures to deal with the mess. Our desperate economic situation has meant that we have had to take some unorthodox but brave measures. There never was any chance that this government, voted into office with a mandate for change, would dare to do things in the business-as-usual manner. The Asempa budget that the highly respected Minister for Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta, presented in March set the tone for the new way of doing things that will transform our economy. It also provided the opportunity to deliver on some of the promises we made during the election campaign. Nurses and teacher training allowances have been restored to take effect at the start of the new school year. Nuisance taxes have been abolished, and other measures have been taken to shift the focus of our economy from taxation to production. The macroeconomic indices are beginning to show a turn for the better. The monetary policy rate of the Bank of Ghana has been cut from 25.5% to 22.5% in the first half of the year. Inflation has gone down from 15.4% in December 2016 to 12.1% in June 2017, i.e., a period of 6 months, the lowest in 4 years. The benchmark 91-day Treasury bill rate was 22.8% in January last year and has narrowed to 11.9% in June 2017, the lowest in 5 years. We're encouraged by the gradual decline in the cost of borrowing and the increase in banks' credit to the private sector by nearly 6% in the first quarter of 2017, compared to a decline of about 7% in the same period in 2016. But we have to continue to work to bring down the cost of borrowing, to enable businesses to have access to to much-needed credit. It is my hope and expectation that these statistics will soon translate into tangible benefits in the lives of Ghanaians. We have also introduced a number of innovative interim packages to help, particularly new entrepreneurs. I do not need to repeat that the greatest challenge we face is the creation of jobs. Young people are very anxious about not finding jobs, and their parents are even more anxious about the future of their children after seeing them through school. I am well aware that the success or otherwise of my administration will be judged largely on job creation. Last Thursday, I launched the National Entrepreneurship and Innovations Plan, which is an innovative scheme under the Business Development Ministry to help startups at the difficult early stages of setting up businesses. We have committed $10 million of public funds, which we hope to leverage into 100 million from private sources to back the plan. The Asempa budget has allocated an amount of $100 million as government contribution, either as equity or in-kind support for the establishment of the district enterprises, one district, one factory. An additional amount of $340 million has been leveraged from local financial institutions for the program. Government, in collaboration with the Association of Ghana Industries, has also arranged a supplier's credit facility for $2 billion from China to provide equipment, machinery, and other facilities in support of the program. It is now clear that this program is destined to succeed. The Asempa budget also provided a $50 million stimulus package for the revival of distressed industries and companies. At the end of June 2017, 285 applications had been received. So far, 118 of these applications have been screened, of which 80 have been adjudged eligible for various stimulus packages. In addition to government's contribution, an amount of $20 million has been earmarked by local financial institutions as part of the stimulus package. This will definitely help in the revival of our industrial sector under the dynamic leadership of the Minister for Trade and Industry, Alan Kyerematen. At this stage of our development, agriculture will necessarily have to provide for the majority of the jobs. And that is why we have to pay urgent attention to the modernization of our agricultural practices. Extension officers are being employed for the first time in many years to provide hands-on support to farmers, and we're generally paying extra attention to every stage of farming. Excuse me. The One Village, One Dam scheme is taking off in the 3 northern regions with the rehabilitation of the existing ones that are in sad states of disrepair. Planting for Food and Jobs, one of our flagship initiatives, has also started with increasing enthusiasm. The program has registered 185,000 farmers out of the 200,000 targeted. The government is bearing 50% of the cost of fertilizers for farmers, and to date, 80,037 tons of fertilizer have been distributed to farmers enrolled on the program. 35,746 metric tons of seedlings have also been supplied to farmers. It is noteworthy that many of the suggestions for the One District, One Factory initiative are agriculture-based. And that tells me that my many sermons on agriculture and food processing as the basis of our industrial takeoff are finding many converts. Over the years, several diseases, such as the swollen shoot, black pod, and mealy bugs, have attacked our agriculture. The latest in the series is the fall armyworm invasion, which is ravaging farmlands across Africa. Government is fully aware of the infestation. Our statistics indicate that it has affected 112,802 hectares of land. So far, 14,420 hectares of land have been destroyed. In dealing with this menace, the government has mobilized support for farmers by supplying them with 72,774 liters of insecticide. More are in the pipeline to confront effectively this surge. In the 6 months of our being in office, easily the headline subject has been the fight against galamsey. I'm glad that the majority of our compatriots have recognized the danger posed to the existence of our nation by the practice of galamsey. I've said before, since the Almighty has blessed our land with mineral resources, we cannot do without mining, and we have the right to exploit the minerals in our land. But we cannot and should not destroy our lands and water bodies and our environment in the search for gold and other minerals. I'm grateful that the majority of people and you, the media, have lent their support to the campaign against galamsey. I'm hoping that the program to restore the degraded lands will attract the same enthusiasm. For my part, I will not relent in this struggle, nor will the Cabinet Committee headed by that eminent Ghanaian, the Minister for Environment, Professor Kwabena Frimpong-Boakye, which is spearheading government's efforts in this fight. Government's infrastructure needs has at its heart the exploitation of our mineral wealth. The Vice President went to China with a plan to leverage some of our bauxite deposits to raise money to tackle the program for industrialization and the building of roads and other infrastructure. If proof were needed, this surely must be it, that this government is neither against mining nor against Chinese, but we certainly are against the degradation of our lands and water bodies by whoever. I suspect it is not a surprise to anyone that we have spent a lot of time these past 6 months on the vast subject of the case of the ease of doing business in our country. By the end of the year, we intend to have our ports functioning properly, and those who require the services of the ports should not feel oppressed by unnecessary and repetitive paperwork and corrupt practices. I expect to hear an announcement shortly from the Attorney General about the prosecution of the customs officials and clearing agents who have been allegedly responsible for the unlawful loss of 2.2 billion cedis to the Central Treasury. As we've already stated, all internal customs barriers will be dismantled by the beginning of October. Moving around the country should be easier, not just for business people, but for the ordinary citizen as well. The National Identification Scheme will be working by the end of the year as promised, and the digital address system will be functioning. If I had been having this function back in January, I suspect I would have to start with Dumso. Today, things have improved quite a lot, but we are not yet where we should be, particularly with regard to the cost of energy. This is a great threat to the operations of business and the cost of living in the country. The Minister for Finance, in collaboration with the Minister for Energy, is at an advanced stage of floating the $2.5 billion energy bond to retire the $2.4 billion debt overhang on the energy sector. This development will attract more investment into the sector and reduce the cost of energy. I am much relieved, however, that the supply and distribution have improved, and we're working to bring costs down and make energy supply generally more reliable. One of the tenets of my government is the commitment to inclusive and accountable governance. Inclusivity requires wider participation of the mass of our citizens by broadening our democratic base. This explains our desire to reorganize our system of regional governance. We have signaled our intention to honor the petitions that have been received for the creation of potentially 6 new regions, 2 each out of the northern and Brong-Ahafo regions, and 1 each out of the western and Volta regions. The Ministry of Regional Reorganization and Development has worked well under the skillful guidance of the Minister, Honorable Dan Kwaku-Botwe, aka the General, to oversee the demands of all groups and communities that will be affected. I have initiated the formal process for the consideration of these petitions by seeking by letter, dated the 26th of June 2017, the advice of the Council of State on them, in accordance with Article 5.2 of the Constitution. If the consultation is positive, the Constitution requires the President to set up a commission of inquiry to inquire into the demands and make recommendations on all the factors involved in the creation of these new regions. The President is further required to act in accordance with the recommendation of the Commission, which will involve a referendum being organized by the Electoral Commission in the affected areas to solicit the views of the affected people. A fundamental part of our strategy for growth has been to associate Ghana strongly with the process of regional and continental integration. The transformation of our economy through the measures we have begun to put in place these past 6 months should make Ghanaian businesses more competitive in West Africa, Africa, and beyond. As the empowered Ghanaian businesses become stronger and more successful, they will need bigger markets. West Africa has a market of 350 million people, which will expand to 500 million in 20 years. Africa's population will also increase to 2 billion, up from its current 1.2 billion within the same time frame. This means that establishment of genuine regional and continental markets in West Africa and Africa should be in our economic interest, for these markets will present immense opportunities to bring prosperity to our nation with hard work, creativity, and enterprise. The principal reasons for my journeys across West Africa since May are to renew friendships with our fellow ECO member states, explore areas of cooperation, and reaffirm Ghana's commitment to the important process of regional and continental integration. Let me address a few words on the matter of BOST and the sale of the 5 million liters of off-spec products. I want to reiterate that even though investigations have been concluded by the security agencies and the National Petroleum Authority, a 9-member committee under the chairmanship of Dr. Lawrence Dakwa, head of the Petroleum Engineering Department of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, has been set up by the Minister for Energy. Amongst others, the committee is tasked with making recommendations to ensure that we put the era of contaminated and off-spec products behind us by tackling issues such as the integrity of the pipeline infrastructure, improving pipeline operations and maintenance, continuous training and skills upgrade of pipeline operators, and implementing improved standard operating procedures, including the controlled evacuation and disposal of products under the direct supervision of the National Petroleum Authority. I want now to stress the importance I attach to ICT development because its potential is enormous, both at the macro and micro levels. The sector's link to GDP growth is well proven. Key initiatives such as the automation of tax and business registration systems are already beginning to yield dividends. Upcoming digital platforms for procurement, immigration, parliamentary and judicial services will transform the way government conducts its business, including the business of cabinet. Also, we want every Ghanaian to have access to good and affordable connectivity. Every Ghanaian everywhere must have access to voice and data connectivity. This is the imperative of our time. The energetic and knowledgeable minister, Honorable Asiedu-Dartey, is another minister providing strong leadership to her sector. It would be remiss of me not to say anything about sanitation. In the short term, it is important to recognize that there are huge debts owed to the service providers, which are hampering their ability to deliver the needed services in a timely and regular manner. The government has, however, taken measures to begin to settle these obligations to facilitate the evacuation and disposal of the heaps of refuse in our cities. It is my understanding that meetings have been held between the ministry, led by an experienced minister, Honorable Akufo-Addo, and the service providers on this matter, and the evacuation of the refuse, which has already started on a modest scale, would be aggressively pursued to rid the cities of filth. Additionally, provision has been made to augment the sanitation infrastructure by constructing waste transfer stations at strategic locations to facilitate rapid collection to final disposal sites, beginning in the Greater Accra metropolitan area. As you know, committed to making Accra the cleanest city in Africa, and the new Metropolitan Chief Executive of Accra, the youthful Mohamed Ajay Soa, is working assiduously to meet this commitment. When I came to this job, I knew there would be difficulties, and I knew there might be some mistakes. For instance, I wish that voluntary groups within my party, the NPP, who had worked so well with us during the campaign, had not overstepped the mark and had not got into the news for all the wrong reasons. I refer to some of the Invincible and Delta forces who got into trouble and gave the party and the government bad publicity. My often stated view, which I have communicated clearly to the law enforcement agencies, is that the best way of dealing with such incidents is to let the law take its course without any political interference. The young men have shown remorse, and the legal process is working. I hope that we all learn the required lessons from these unfortunate incidents. Then there was the horrendous murder of Major Mahama. I trust and pray that the trauma suffered by the whole nation as a result of the incident will cure us of the barbaric practice of mob justice. It is absolutely essential that we leave the prosecution and punishment of suspected criminals to the police and the judiciary. And when it comes to wrongdoers of the kind that indeed cause our nation the greatest harm, corrupt public officials, I'm glad to say that the Office of Special Prosecutor will be with us shortly. The bill has been currently being gazetted and will be in Parliament during this meeting. We all, in and out of Parliament, should take an interest and help with the rapid passage of a law that will serve us well. In responding to the concerns, not just of Ghanaians at home, but of overseas Ghanaians as well, government facilitated this year Ghana Diaspora Homecoming Summit. It afforded government the opportunity to listen at first hand to the concerns, suggestions, and opinions of overseas Ghanaians on the development of our country. We know from the examples of several countries what fruitful collaboration between their overseas nationals and their governments has brought to their national development and prosperity, and my government intends to emulate them. And to our overseas Ghanaians, let me again apologize for the whining. Declared my assets within 2 weeks of my inauguration, and so has the Vice President. The ministers have declared their asset, and I'm insisting that all those required to do so under the law should comply. I suspect this has not happened before, and I intend to make sure we keep to the intentions behind this requirement of the law. In other words, I am sticking to my word that those who would serve in my government must protect and not abuse the public purse, and must at all times recognize that they are in service, in public service, not for private gain, but for public service. Thank you so much for your attention, and may God bless us all in our homeland, Ghana, and make her great and strong.
Thank you very much, President of the Republic of Ghana. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to question time. We have 2 microphones. You don't need to queue behind the microphones. Just sit where you are, raise your hand, and then I would spot you, and then I'll call you, and then you come to the nearest microphone to you and ask your question. Gentleman, yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Nana Kwekwe from TV3. I'm a member of the Presidential Press Corps. Mr. President, over the past 6 months, you've been talking about Galamsey. How critical is Galamsey to you? And especially when you've put your political career on the line, how important is it for you to see the end of Galamsey?
Well, I think your question provides its own answer. For a politician to put his career on the line for an issue means that that issue for him is very important. No, but I mean, beyond gesturing, I don't think that there should be any doubt amongst us that this phenomenon threatens the future of our nation. We're all aware, are witnesses to rivers drying up, our landscape being defaced and devastated, our forests being attacked, riverbeds in our country are being mined extensively for minerals. All of these are things that are obvious to all of us. I don't think that it is me, Nana Akufo-Addo, who has only seen them. I think that we're all aware. The issues, whether we're going to do anything about it or not. I believe that the time has come to do something about it. And there's a story that I think I've said, I don't know whether in public, but which really is what, I mean, scared me more than even what I had seen myself, was when the chairman of our cabinet committee on this matter, the fight against Galamsey, Professor Frimpong-Boateng, went to a meeting in Côte d'Ivoire next door, and came back to tell me that he had brought a message from the leaders of the Ivorian government that the activities of Galamsey people in Ghana were now beginning to affect their water supply system in Côte d'Ivoire. I said to myself, well, the dimensions of these things is not just a Ghanaian dimension. It has large repercussions for all of us living in this part of the world. So just let me repeat again. It is an extremely important objective, bringing the Galamsey phenomenon to an end in Ghana. And within the confines of the law, what is acceptable behavior by governments, I intend to mobilize all the resources that government has at its disposal to bring this phenomenon to an end. I'm very, very clear about that, and I'm not going back on this commitment. I've been told the young men were saying they voted for me, and if I continue down this way, they can be sure that they will not vote for me again in 2020. Well, the 2020 vote is not clear that Akufo-Addo's name will be on the ballot in the first place. And even if his name is on the ballot, this is not going to be the reason why I will stop. We're going to continue. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, so we took a male. I'll balance it by taking a female.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and thank you for the opportunity. I am Nana Intri from Peace FM. Recently, you were awarded
Jefferson.
So do I start? Good afternoon, Mr. President, and thank you for the opportunity.
Still not working? We can hear.
Hello, 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 hello.
Recently, you were rewarded with a gender champion in the just ended AU summit. My question is, Mr. President, in your view, what do you think you did to win this award?
Thank you. It's a question that I forgot to pose to Alpha Conde, the president of the AU, when he did. But I think it's because of some of the gestures they've seen that we have made. But frankly, I think that this is an area that I could still do much better than I've done so far. I've not been able to meet the 30% benchmark that we stated in our manifesto across the spectrum of public life and appointments. And much as significant efforts have been made. I have one or two firsts to my credit. First Chief of Staff is a woman, First Secretary of the Cabinet is a woman, and there are others as well. But nevertheless, I think that much more work needs to be done by me than has been done so far. And it's an area which I think can do much. Hopefully that the award was also meant to inspire me in the manner in which I'm speaking to you to work better and work stronger in this area.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to take 2, maybe 3 sets of questions and then allow Mr. President to note them and then answer them rather than go and come. I'll take you and then I'll go back to the middle, Avle after that. He first, and then Avle.
Mr. President, my name is Robert Fosasari. I work with the EIB brand. When you took office, the Attorney General's Department, particularly state attorneys, were on strike. You managed to get them to call off the strike with promise that their award from the National Labour Commission will be addressed. It appears like it has still not been addressed yet. again, linked to that, I think, is the issue about law school students writing exams into the Ghana School of Law. It appears like there has been a turf war between the law students and the General Legal Counsel. Being a lawyer yourself, we want to find out from you, is there anything you can do to step in this matter and help law students in Ghana?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bernard Avle. I work at CTFM. Mr. President, I remember during the campaign, yourself and the Vice President expressed worry about the level of debt that Ghana was incurring. And among other things, you said that because of the mismanagement, we were having to borrow, and then we had enough internal resources, and therefore we should block the loopholes. Permit me to give you some figures. In March this year, we went for a 1 billion Ghana cedi 3-year bond. In April, a $2.25 billion bond, which translates to 10.25 billion cedis, was announced. In the same month, we announced a $2.4 billion bond to clear legacy debts in the energy sector. Translates that to 12 billion cedis. Last week, we were told there's a 17.4 billion cedi bond being sought for Q3. Putting all the figures together in Ghana cedis, that's about 40 billion cedis. If all these bonds go through by Q3, the last time I checked, our GDP was about 80 billion cedis. If within the first year, we're already borrowing up to half of our GDP, where are the internal resources? How much resources have you generated internally? Why are we still borrowing this much? Thank you.
Metro TV.
Good afternoon, Mr. President and all present. My name is Adel Kwesi Machtuba from Metro TV. Mr. President, my first question has to do with the issue of open defecation in the country. Ghana aspires to be a major tourism hub on the continent, but this issue is bedeviling the country. Several measures have been put in place and they're still on the ascendancy. Mr. President, I want to know the measures that your government will put in place to ensure that this is kept. In relation to that, Mr. President, there is a project which was started under the presidency of President Akufo, administration of President Akufo, the Accra Sewerage Improvement Project, ASIP. Several years down the line, this project, which is ultimately aimed at ensuring that households within the city have toilet facilities in each household. This has not been realized yet. What measures are you going to put in place to ensure that this project is realized and its impact felt? Finally, on the railway sector...
My friend, I'm sorry.
Last question. No. On the railway sector, Mr. President, issue of encroachment of the railway lands along the railway lines. This issue is a major thing that, if not watched, may lead to major disaster. As your government take measures to ensure that the railway sector is revamped, Mr. President, how are you going to ensure that encroachment on railway lines is kept in a way and manner such that Ghanaians and those who will be affected will see that it is a necessity and not insensitivity on the part of your government? Thank you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let me make something very clear. Next time, I would cut anybody who asks 2 or 3 questions in one. That's number one. Number two is that we can't sit here interminably. So please, as much as possibly, try and go straight to your question. Kaba.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Yeah, this will be the 3rd one, and then the president. 4th.
This is the 4th one.
Okay, after this,
Mr.
President will answer, but go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Prior to coming to office, a lot of my name is Kojo Asare-Bafo Champon, otherwise called Kaba. That's imperfect. That's imperfect. I've stated that already. Prior to coming to office, a lot of your critics and admirers alike construed you to be, quote unquote, a very wild person. And now coming to office, a very good admirer of yours and a very good supporter of the MPP in London called Gorazo sent me a message that that wild nature known about the president, Asiedu-Dartey Akufo-Addo, seemed to have fizzled out, and you seem to have been tamed by the presidency. Have you been tamed, Mr. President?
There are these 4 questions. Some of them I'm going to ask one of the ministers to respond. For instance, about the situation about the Attorney General's office. I believe the Attorney General is here. She's here. I'm going to ask her to respond to the question about the strikes and also about the law schools. And Dr. Bawumia will respond about the indebtedness. As far as about the open defecation, I think that it's a very, very serious problem for our country. I'm glad the matter has come up. You know, we're committed to this program of 1 million toilets to be distributed across the country. The sanitation ministry is working strongly at it. I'm not quite sure that it is to complete the ASID program or whether a new program is being, but he can also clarify that for you. The encroachment on the railways, it's obvious that before any major work begins, that the ministry is going to have to talk to all those who are the encroachers. We can't just begin the process without engaging the communities on, and it's very much part of the program of the minister that he himself is going to lead the groups that are going to engage the various communities to explain to them, first of all, the importance of what we want to do, of having a decent rail network in our country, and therefore their collaboration, that ultimately their communities, because really if this thing is properly planned and programmed, the communities where the rails lines are going to go to themselves should benefit from the exercise. It shouldn't just be that they pass through areas of Ghana without leaving an imprint. The economic activity of the areas through which the trains pass themselves should also be heightened and enhanced. And that is very much part of our thinking and the thinking of the design that is presently being put in place by the railway minister. So the attitude is not that anybody is going to use force to evict, but that we're going to engage the various communities before the process begins. A lot of the, Mr. Kaba, a lot of the image of myself that went out was an image painted by my political opponents for their own purposes. And there are people here who are not my political sympathizers, but who are friends of mine who have known me for a long time, who know that there's nothing wild about me, and there's nothing anyway. What's in practice here? And that there's never wild about me. Yes, a man of strong views, and it's difficult for you to threaten me or bully me. I will stand my ground, small as I am, I'll still stand my ground. And if that therefore translates in being wild, then I have not changed at all, because I still stand where on my views that I have. But the idea that I was some sort of, intoxicated, crazy character going around was never part of the reality. So what they're seeing of me in office is Nana Akufo-Addo, as has always been. No change at all. But it's now becoming more clear what kind of a person I am. So I'm going to ask the Attorney General, first of all, to come and talk about the pay issues in the law school. And then Dr. Bawumia will then also follow on the debt situation. He's the chairman of the economic management team. I think he will be in a better position to explain these matters than myself.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the issue of the attorneys at the Office of the Attorney General should be put within a certain perspective. It so happens that lawyers at the Office of the Attorney General have their remunerations benchmarked against that of magistrates and judges. In the past, it turns out that increases that had been enjoyed by the bench and therefore to which attorneys were entitled were not being paid. And therefore it created some arrears. Rightfully, they made several requests, indeed many, either through meetings or in writing, some of which I myself saw. Ultimately, it ended at the Labor Commission. Labor Commission then decides that, yes, they're entitled. When I assumed office, indeed during transition, I engaged with them with a view to finding a way of solving it. The president also personally spoke with them. So they agreed to go back. What was not clear was the exact increments that they were asking for. When I assumed office, I had the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission and other stakeholders come to a meeting. All of us met, and it was decided that we needed to ascertain the levels of increases because they changed over a period with a view of determining the real entitlements. We have been able to obtain that, and we have passed that on to the Ministry of Finance. They are challenged because there are aspects that the attorneys are asking for, which are considered as double take because remuneration, salaries and allowances have been consolidated. We have agreed in a meeting that those will be separated and what is determined as due will be paid them whilst we solve the rest for the future. I thank you. Regarding the justices, again, the law school. I have a personal position on that. We have a situation such that you have only one school of law, and yet the accreditation is given to many schools, including private ones. So we have a situation on hand where you have many institutions offering law degrees, which qualifies people to enter the school of law. Of course, with one law school in a country such as us, it has not been possible to absorb all the people who are qualified to enter. So some criteria had to be put in place. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court says it is against the law. Some moratorium has been created because you don't want a chaotic situation. But speaking for myself, I think we need to look at, and I said this during my vetting, that we need to open up without sacrificing competence and standards, to open up so that greater numbers of our otherwise qualified degree holders can also become lawyers. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
It's working, yes. Thank you very much. Bernard asked the question about the debt and how it appears to be increasing. I think we have to go back a little bit. You saw that last year the deficit was 9.4% of GDP. That's where it ended. And thanks to the Asempa budget, we've gone back on a path of fiscal consolidation to bring back the deficit this year to 6.5% of GDP. Now, in doing so, you are going to be bringing down the debt stock in the process. I'll also let you know that in the last 4 years, between 2012 and 2016, the debt stock went up from 45% of GDP to 72% of GDP. That means on average, every year, the government was adding 6.75% of GDP to the debt stock. Now, the GDP It's not 80 billion, as maybe you misspoke, but it's closer to 200 billion this year. And we are going to end the year, after inheriting about 72% of GDP, we are hoping to bring it down slightly, between 70 and 71% of GDP. So we are looking at how we manage the finances to bring down the debt burden. So even if you are borrowing, the burden of that we are trying to bring down through the process of fiscal consolidation. And the finance minister is here. He's keeping all of us in line. What happened before with this unbridled borrowing, which cannot be financed. So you find that we owe so many contractors who have not been paid and so on. Today, the give-me system is really working. It is not possible to circumvent it. And so if there is no money, you are not going to be entering into that contract in the first place. And so this is actually helping us, as you see, keep very much on target as far as our deficit is concerned, for example, through the first half of the year. And I think that this is also seen in the domestic money market, where you have seen interest rates coming down from 22% last year, and just a year later, you have 11.9%. And if you are borrowing rampantly in the domestic market, you will see that interest rate decline. So the simple answer is that the debt stock, in terms of its impact on its burden on the economy, is not actually increasing. The debt to GDP ratio is actually stabilizing, and we are hoping to bring it down by the end of the year, even if marginally. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take another lady. Yes, you, and then I'll come to Captain Smart, and then I'll go to the middle and take you. Yeah, yes. So the lady, Captain Smart, and then you, three.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Nanesi Boatin. I work with Oman FM.
All right, so we're going to cross over very shortly back to the banquet hall of the Flagstaff House, where the first encounter with the president and journalists is taking place. Let's go back now as the live feed has been rectified.
Different perspectives on the politics of our country. That should not necessarily attract my attention if you're working for the program. So it is important to make a distinction about the nature of the appointees that we're talking about. And that for me is a decisive matter. The ambulances and the state of our emergency health care, I think it tells you about the nature of my inheritance. Yes, see how very bad the cupboard was and how very run down the public services in our country are. We're having to deal with all of this thing now, improving revenue generation so that we can be more self-sufficient, bringing greater efficiency into the manner in which we deal with our public finances. There's a whole array of things that we have to coordinate together, which will result in us being able to improve public services in our country. What am I doing? That's why I'm here, is to try and correct the situation about those who decided to put their confidence in me and voting for me. Wyomin's money. Wyomin's money is a subject of all kinds of legal processes. Those legal processes, at some stage or another, will come to an end. And I know there will come a day of reckoning on that matter. The size of government. I'm not worried about the size of government because I think that, first of all, the majority, the overwhelming majority of the people in the government are members of parliament who are already on the public exchequer. I think something like 2/3 or almost three-fifths of the appointees are all members of parliament, so that the incidence of their becoming ministers on the public exchequer is minimal for what it is already as members of parliament. And secondly, the really important thing is your capacity get hold of the machinery and deliver. So at the end of the day, at the end of the 4 years, people of this country will wake up or feel a significant improvement in their lives. There are more jobs available. People are getting better wages. The cost of living is something that is within the reach of ordinary people. I don't think they're going to worry themselves too much about the size of my government. My responsibility is to deliver that result, and these are the methods that I've chosen to do it. If I succeed, the whole ball game is mine. If I'm not, the Ghanaian people will express themselves accordingly. It's important that the fight against corruption be seen to be a fight against crime and not a struggle or a fight about political opponents. I won't accept that the process of bringing people before the courts for acts of corruption are done for political purposes. They are done because you have evidence that people have breached the law. And thereby cause damage to the public interest. To be able to do so, you need to be able to build strong, well-documented, well-researched allegations. There are a lot of allegations in our country about people in office. Many of them, when you probe, turn out not to be the case. If we had to go along with all the allegations, we'd have a plethora of cases, many of them the courts would not support. So the statement that I have made, all kinds of allegations have come to my notice and come to the notice of my government, and there are thorough investigations going forward. That I will not accept prosecutions being brought just in order to satisfy the appetite of people that people should be prosecuted. They're going to be brought because they have been well documented, well researched, well documented. There's strong evidence of wrongdoing, which a court of law can reliably convict, use to convict people. And the lawyers say that the responsibility of the state, of the attorney general, of the prosecutor, is to present what they call a prima facie case, i.e., a case that if you don't hear the response of the accused persons, you can say amounts to a case warranting conviction. So there's a lot of work being done. They will see the light of day where these allegations are being thoroughly investigated, and when the time comes for them to find their area in the form of prosecutions, it's my expectation is that there will not be flimsy cases. There will not be about an attempt to witch hunt members of the last government. I'm not going to lend myself to that exercise. We're going to bring cases, and there will be cases. There's several in the pipeline that I'm aware of, but cases that will make it clear to the courts and also to public opinion that yes, something wrong took place there, which requires the intervention of the courts. The special prosecutor, when he comes, will help, but there are already instruments for enforcing the criminal law which are already in place. So it cannot be a question of waiting for the special prosecutor. It's a question of making sure that whatever is brought into the public domain as cases are thoroughly well-researched, well-documented, and that they are strong cases and not just flimsy exercise playing to the gallery. That will be my answer.
Okay, I'll take then Kwesi Pratt, and then Momin from GTV. So 1, 2, and then 3.
Good afternoon. My name is Stella Wilson Ajapon from Ken City Media. Mr. President, election after election, I witness desperate and frustrated people, citizenry, our citizenry, who want to go and exercise their vote. Indeed, we have people that travel to their polling stations and their names are not in the book. I know that there is the national identification system going on. Is there anything in the process? And before I go on, you are known to be a reformist, so I believe that this is possible under your watch. Is there anything in the national identification system that will allow people to vote from wherever they are so that they don't have to travel the length and breadth of our country to go and exercise their votes? Indeed, it's a desperate situation, and I think that we have to look at that. Is there anything that you have in the process? Thank you.
My name is Kwesi Pratt, and I work for the Inside. Mr. President, for some time now, Morocco has been pushing for the de-recognition of the Saudi Arab Democratic Republic. Would your government bow to Moroccan pressure? And is your government in any way involved in the move to admit a colonial power to ECOWAS? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President, my name is Abdul Hayi Mumin. I work with the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. I'm just curious that 6 months into your government and 2 months before the implementation of a major policy, which is a free senior high school education, even at this forum, almost nothing has been said about it. I am curious, again, that for a party, a government that campaigned on the back of free senior high school in 2008 and in 2016, that as we speak, people, especially where I come from, rural folk, are still not very sure whether the standard of qualification to enter free senior high school, which is the cutoff point is 30, grade 30, I believe, and that all of a sudden the government that promised free senior high school is giving us a new cutoff point. People are anxious, Mr. President, that are you going to deny a section of Ghanaians free senior high school because you are making it free for just a section of Ghanaians? Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
Mrs. Ajipon, everything to do with arrangements about our voting system, unfortunately, are not in my hands. If they were in my hands, it would be very different. They're not in my hands. They are the responsibility of the Electoral Commission. I think that all of us can continue to make suggestions to the Electoral Commission about how to improve our electoral system. Government, like citizens of Ghana, all of us will be doing that and seeing whether we cannot at every stage improve the quality of our processes. But the final decision, I'm responding to what am I going to do? I cannot do anything about it. It's not for me to make the rules about the electoral process. There's a constitutional body that has that mandate. It isn't the president, it's the Electoral Commission. But what we can all do, of course, is to let our voice be heard, and I am confident that in any functioning state, the louder the voice is on a particular issue, the more likely that the public authority will respond to it and hear about it. The colonial power into ECOWAS. Morocco is an African country by geography and by involvement, and this is why Ghana supported the admission of Morocco into the African Union. It was done both on the part of Morocco and on the Union without any preconditions. And we supported that point of view. It's an African country. It's an anomaly that a country on the continent can, for one reason or another, deny entry into the Continental Organization. So as far as that is concerned, that's the AU. The matter to do with ECOWAS is a matter that is now under consideration. ECOWAS is about to go through all kinds of procedures to examine the proposition. It has not happened before. We've had expressions of interest by Tunisia in having observer status at the ECOWAS. We've had expressions of interest by Chad to become associated in some form with ECOWAS. But this is the first time we're having an application such as the Moroccan one. The leadership of ECOWAS has decided to go through a procedure for examining the merits of the application. I think we'll make our voice heard at the appropriate time, but I today will not tell you where we are. We want to see the process that will be put in place, and then how we will respond to it. Just also, this Sarawi matter, as you know very well, I know you're very committed and an activist. People have very strong views both ways. You'll be surprised, even on the decision to admit Morocco into the AU, how that was such a divisive issue in Addis Ababa. But there are lots and lots of African countries that were very strongly in support of it and who feel very strongly that Morocco also has a case. The issues are at large, and we will see how they play. The free SHS. No comment, because the program for introducing the free secondary high school policy has been spelt out in a series of public engagements by the Minister for Education. They've set up a secretariat, they've set up an implementation committee, and he himself has engaged the media and public opinion several times. He's about to do so in the course of the next week, 10 days again, to set out exactly what the roadmap is that will bring the policy into play. What he has said is that it will be available to those who gain access to senior secondary school in the public sector. That is the principle. I don't know that there's been a shift in the goalposts as far as cutoff is concerned. What I've heard, and I think it is correct, is that the policy will avail those who are accepted in the senior high schools. It's gone further, because on these matters too, you will always be involved in issues of equity like what you're raising. To say that the policy that is being devised by the Ministry of Education is that the so-called elite schools in Ghana are going to be required to reserve 30% of places in them to those schools that come from, if you like, more disadvantaged backgrounds, and are going to be required to reserve 30% of places in them to those schools that come from, if you like, more disadvantaged backgrounds and locations. So the effort to try and create some kind of a balance in what is being proposed is one that is engaging all of our attention, and it must engage all of our attention. An educational part of the reason why I've been so insistent on the free senior high schools, and an educational system which is, if you like, class or group driven, where only people who have money can guarantee the successful education of their children and then perpetuate that, is one that's creating a society that ultimately is not stable or tenable. We have to have a Ghana where all the talents have an opportunity to be able to come to the fore, and therefore you have to create a system where opportunities are widespread and they're not confined or restricted to one group of people or to one class of people. I feel very strongly about that, and it is part and a very important part of the reason for the advocacy that I've given to this idea in the last few years. So the reason why there's no mention about it today is not because it has been abandoned. On the contrary, it is very high priority. I'm going to look very foolish in the eyes of people and also extremely dishonest. After being in office, one of the things that I don't see to is the senior free high school system. People are going to say that I came to hoodwink them and con them. I am not a hoodwinker, I'm not a con man, and I'm an honest man, and I will make sure that it is done.
Okay, there are media houses that have 5, 6 people here and so on. To be fair, I won't want one media house, many people. I'll take Victor from Daily Graphic.
Yeah. Okay. Bonne journée, Monsieur le Président. Je vous remercie pour cette invitation. Mr. President, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to commend your government for the announcement that came from the senior minister. My name is Kwame Adinkra. I work with the Busian FM EAB brand. I'd like to thank you for the announcement that came from the senior minister to the effect that capitation will be abolished in Ashanti region. And the anticipation has been very high, and we pray that it will be very, very soon. Secondly, all the roads in the Garden City are very fast deteriorating. President Kufuor decided to build some interchanges to give Kumasi a facelift. I want to find out whether there's a comprehensive policy of your government to continue these projects, especially with the interchanges, to complete the inner ring road of the Garden City to give it a facelift. Thank you very much, Mr. President. In any case, I like your fabric.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to you. My name is Echo Moses. I report for Bloomberg News. Your Excellency, my media house is Bloomberg. In your statement, you said you were shocked by the state of affairs on assumption of power. Here you are with an IMF program that for all intents and purposes seeks to sort of limit certain aspects of your programs. This same fund seems to be suggesting that you have an extension of the program. In the scheme of things, where does this fit? How much of a blessing or otherwise has this whole program been? All in the context of your rhetoric that you are building a Ghana without aid. And not to mention that some of our agencies have been accepting certain aid from some of them, from China and the rest. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Good afternoon. My name is Victor Kwakumi, the Daily Graphic. I want to find out what is the state of the Vice President's residence behind the police headquarters. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Mr. President would answer, and I will take the last round of questions. Last one.
The abolition of capitation in Ashanti, that's a decision the government has taken. I believe that the Minister of Health is here. He can give the details as to the exact time it will come into play. But that decision has been taken and it is firm. The capitation in Ashanti is coming to an end. My understanding is that the infrastructure commitments that were in place when we came into office are going to continue. Including, of course, the road network in the country and in Kumasi in particular. We're going to continue it. Some adjustments are going to have to be made because of money. I mean, you've heard constantly here the difficulties we have with our public finances. But one of the and it's part of the document, the manifesto we put out, across Ghana, the number of national assets that are in the state of deterioration, largely because they have not been completed, they are half built and have been put aside, largely as a result of all these various changes of government, is alarming. That's why we committed ourselves to establishing a national asset recovery unit that is going to concentrate on finding ways to leverage these assets for their completion and enhancing our national store. So we're not going back on these commitments. The issue is to trying to find the money to complete it. But then we have a banker of great renown as our Minister of Finance, and he's working miracles to be able to find the money for things to continue. The shock to the state of affairs, yes, and where does the IMF program comes? The IMF program is not going to be extended. We took the decision on coming in that the country had entered into this program in 2015. It was coming to an end in April 2018, and we felt that to give a certain sense of stability and coherence to our country's economic policy making, that we would complete the program. And we're committed to completing the program. The last budget that is going to be held under the IMF program will be the budget that is going to be laid before the House in November by the finance minister. That will be the last budget of the Ghana government under the current IMF program. So there's going to be no question of an extending the program. The program is going to be completed. It's going to be completed, and we will then be on our own. I mean, that's where most of us want us to be on our own, to be able to mobilize our own resources to confront our future. The concept is a Ghana beyond aid, not a Ghana without aid. It's a Ghana beyond aid, that we're going to grow ourselves into a position whereby we're no longer dependent on external sources to finance our budget. We're in a situation whereby critical parts of the budget of our country require foreign grants in health and education. We've got to work our way out of that situation so that we can stand on our own 2 feet and design our own future, free of external influences. I believe strongly in that, and I believe we're capable of doing that. And so that's the thrust. But there is no question of the IMF program being extended. The IMF program, which comes to an end technically in April next year, is going to be completed by this government along the terms of which it is, because there's been a certain amount of renegotiation of the program has taken place already since we came into office, to be able to accommodate our perspectives and our policies. But it is coming to an end next year with the budget that is going to be prepared this year. I think the Vice President's house, the Vice President himself is here. Let's give him the opportunity to respond on that.
Mr. President, that's rather unfair. Well, I have not actually visited this house. I've only seen the paperwork, the $14 million mansion. Maybe I don't know if there's any work going on, but I doubt it very much at the moment. I think there's no work going on, and the whole issue has been around how the cost of this building, and it may have to be renegotiated, but it probably doesn't make sense for Ghana to leave it lying idle. I think we need to sit down with the contractor and see how it can be renegotiated so that it can be completed. We are starting from the position that $14 million is way too high for a bungalow. So that's where we are.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the president asked his ministers to come to this gathering for a purpose. So when we take this last round of questions, we shall end the program formally. But these ministers will be available to you either inside this hall or outside there for you to ask a few questions in the sectors that you didn't get the opportunity to put to the president. So please don't be distressed when we end this round of questions. I'll take Evans Mensah from Joy FM. Osei Prempe is here. Nanaba Namwa from GH1. And then I'll top up with a last lady and then we close. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, my name is Evans Mensah. I work with the Multimedia Group. One question on the bust issue. The regulator, the NCA, established in fact, that the MD sold the contaminated fuel to 2 unlicensed firms. Yet the BNI cleared him and said he did no wrong, a position that has been endorsed by the Energy Minister. Do you also endorse the BNI report? Plus, the manifesto of 2016 was themed change, an agenda for jobs. How many jobs have you created in the last 6 months?
Mr. President, my name is Nane Kwefrie, otherwise known as Mami Broni, EIB. My first question, I have 2 questions, please. Listening to the president, I was expecting to hear something on sports, which I didn't. I want to find out, is the MPP government yet to do something on sports? My question number 2, proud to come in, please, just the last one. Proud to coming into government, the MPP wrote a letter to the Italian Prime Minister in connection with the ENI contract, that is a Sankofa thing. I want to find out, is ENI under investigation? If yes, for what? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Kwame Osefere Bempa. I work for Kantanka Television. Mr. President, I want to ask you about pensions. If you look at the condition of pensioners in this country, say you know it's nothing good to write home about. What I have observed, sir, is that it's because our salaries, our pensions are linked to our salaries, which are normally inadequate. And for that matter, when people go on pension, they mostly suffer. In other jurisdictions, they take resources from other sectors and put it in a fund to support pensioners. For example, in Norway, they take money from their oil and set it up in a fund purposely to support old age and pensions. I would like to find out from you, sir, what we are doing as a country in the area of pensioners to sustain our people who have dedicated their lives in serving their motherland for a lot of years. Thank you very much, sir.
After Nanaba Anamwa, Mr. President, with great respect to you, because you are a gender champion, I'll top up with one more lady, Lady Vim, and then we close.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Nanaba Anamwa from GH1 TV. In the run-up to the elections, you made a number of campaign promises. Key amongst them was the one district, one factory. One, you said, wielded the potential to turn around the economy. There hasn't been much elucidation on the progress being made so far. I'd like to know from you what the status of that policy is. And also, the Honorable Member of Parliament for Assam North, Mr. Kennedy Japan, has been making a number of utterances on radio. The latest was that you haven't nominated enough people from the central region. How do you feel about his utterances? Do they irritate you, or do they affect the thinking of your government? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Efia Pokia, and I work for Adom FM, part of the Multimedia Group. Your opponents have been making comments, criticisms against you in the last few months. And they say that since you assumed office, your government has been characterized by anarchy, chaos, and lawlessness. They cite a couple of issues. One of them is the Delta Force issue. They go beyond that. They cite Captain Major Mohammed's death, his killing, as another example fast track and come forward, they come to cite other examples about internal wrangling, even the selection in your own party. I want to ask you, and one other example that they cite, which a member of your own government, Honorable Amewu, has confirmed to us that his office was bugged. There's confusion about the bugging of the office. We've had cause to question whether this office we are sitting in is bugged or not, and whether we are safe here or not. Mr. President, my question to you is, are we safe as a people? Are you safe in this office, Flagstaff House, as the President of this Republic? Are we safe?
As far as being safe, you have to ask Husseini, Inusa Husseini, whether we are safe. If you want an example of anarchy, that's it. Or does it mean suggested that I got him to do it, or what? I don't understand how that becomes an issue of anarchy or chaos. I think that some of the things that have happened are unfortunate. I'd be the first to recognize that the Delta and the Invisible Forces episode was unfortunate. I believe that they've been brought under control. I think that they themselves understand where they are within the framework of things. A lot of it has to be with expectations that perhaps with the election immediately there'll be jobs, etc. But I think realism is beginning to come into play, and they're beginning now to settle down. The legal processes are also going on. And I also think that the growing awareness that I am determined to take politics out of criminal behavior is also beginning to have its impact. The death of Major Muhammad, that one is something that none of us can find any proper justification for. But the picture that is being painted, yes, I understand the politics of that picture. It's in the interest of the opposition to give this image that somehow things are not going right, things are breaking down. But I don't believe that it corresponds to the reality of what's going on in our country. I think that the conditions of Ghana are strong, the stability in our country is there, the interests of people and what's going on in our country is very strong. Investor confidence, both inside and outside the country, is gone because they recognize that the general atmosphere is there. It takes me to the internal wrangling in the MPP. That's as old as man. I mean, MPP without wrangling would be the MPP. It's always wrangling inside the MPP. I don't think there's anything new about that at all. It's that kind of a party, very disputatious. And everybody has a voice, and they're determined that that voice should be heard. So in itself, it doesn't give me any great cause for anxiety. By the same token, the utterances of Kennedy Agyapong. Kennedy Agyapong and I, we're in the same party. We've known each other for a long time. I know the sort of person he is. I'm not at all surprised where he's going. That's him. It adds a certain spice to the politics of our country. But once again, they don't irritate me. I don't have a problem with speech and expression. They don't irritate me. We can all have our views as to the validity of some of the interventions that have been made. I think the statement that somehow or other the central region has been kept out of my considerations in forming my government, that I will not accept because I don't believe it is true. The one district, one factory, the status of the policy, I've made some comments about it, but perhaps I'll give Alan Chamatin the opportunity to flesh out where we are, as also on the issue of to what extent can we commit resources from other sectors of our economy to support our pensions. In Norway's been able to do it because Norway's been very well organized. There's been a lot of transparency in the way they've handled their oil resources and wealth, and that has allowed them to be able to develop very well, and of course, in so doing, secure better their own people, and so far we have done. we have a heritage fund which we get out of our oil, which permits us to be able to allocate it to different sectors of the economy that require attention. I suspect that as we grow our oil revenues and more oil is being found in Ghana, more fields are coming into play, the ability to be able to look at some of those matters will also increase. But it's a difficult area. You're talking about the needs of those who are today in the workforce and being able to guarantee them better living conditions than they have now, as against also those who are already in retirement. But establishing equity and trying to make sure that there is a balance, that's part of the work of the Fair Wages Commission, it's part of the work of the Ministry of Employment. I'm hopeful that we will be able to strike increasingly more realistic and at the same time more equitable relations between those who have finished their work and how therefore the society has some responsibility to guarantee them in their old age when they're infirm and not so strong as before, against the claims of those of us who are still active. I include myself very much amongst those who are still active. So that balance. Sports government on sports. I think a lot is being expressed and done by the Minister for Sports. He's made many pronouncements about where our mind is about the development of sports, that we're going to try and de-emphasize the emphasis on football and bring the other sports into the basket of consideration and care. I mean, policies are being rolled out. One of the problems, of course, about holding this kind of encounter after 6 months in office is that most of the things you're doing are initiatives. They are not about concrete achievements at this stage. You're building the foundation of your policy and your program, but not that you are in the ability to come and say, I was asked how many jobs have I created in 6 months. I'd be surprised if I could give a positive answer to that question. But I think that if you were to ask me the question in 18 months' time, I'll be in a much stronger position to answer the question, because the policies that we are putting in place, it's all about job creation. It's all about trying to build our enterprises and expand our enterprises to be able to perform better and employ more and more and more people. I think 6 months into the system, it's a bit difficult to be able to give a positive answer to that question. And I think on these matters, we all have to be very frank. And I mean, there's a lot that's been done in the public sector in terms of people in the cocoa area being brought in on board but I'm thinking largely in terms of private sector jobs as being what I consider, quote, real jobs. And I think 6 months of our administration is too short a period to be able to answer that question realistically. The boss regulator. My understanding is that initially the regulator took the view that the product had been sold to an unlicensed buyer. He subsequently came back to admit that this, unfortunately, is an area without regulation. And so, therefore, the statement that was then made by the BNI and by the minister that the chief executive of BOSS had done nothing wrong was stating a statement of fact. There was no regulation of these off-spec products within our laws that require that the people who bought it. If you look, for instance, at the evidence that had been advanced, even individuals having bought the product in the past, it clearly showed that it was not a regulated area. That there is a need to regulate it going forward, that's a whole different question. And I believe the committee that the minister has put in place is going to be looking at all of that. First of all, the need for regulation, again, whether or not we can in fact stop the production of off-spec products by improving all the various mechanisms and processes in place, the infrastructure and the rest. That is what the committee has been established to do. We will wait the report. But I don't think I'm being asked to make a choice between the regulator and the minister. I believe both the regulator and the minister are ad idem in saying that this is an unregulated area of activity, so that the activity of the chief executive of BOSS doesn't attract the epithet wrongdoing. I believe that's it. So those will be my answers. I hope that they are providing some light. I'm not in the position to agree on that. So let me thank you all very much for this first opportunity to meet with you, to hear my concerns, and for you to express yours. As I say, I want to do it at least twice a year, in the middle of the year, the end of the year, beginning of the year, middle of the year, so that we keep in touch with each other all the time. This is the least stressful way that I can get my messages out to the Ghanaian people. And you help me do that. Even your presence here tells me that I have an opportunity also to get my messages out. But more importantly than that, I think the process of accountability is important. That the public office holders are given the opportunity to explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then members of citizens of the country also have an opportunity to pose the kind of questions that have been posed to me today. Important matters of foreign policy. The revolutionaries amongst us were still very committed to the struggle. The language, but you never know, Kwesi. You might join Freddie. So, thank you all very much for coming, and may God bless us all. Thank you, and our homeland Ghana. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we started with a prayer. We would like to end with a prayer. I would call on the Honorable Nana Madukia to give us a closing prayer. But please, the Honorable Alan Tremanting, the Honorable Energy Minister, there are some clarifications that you need on energy and industry. They will be available to take your questions. Thank you very much after this.
All right, so that is the first in the series of encounters the president intends to have with the media. And this is the first time a president in the Fourth Republic is having this media encounter in 6 months. And that's by Asiedu-Dartey Akufo-Addo. Just as you saw on your screens, a live coverage from the banquet hall of the Flagstaff House, where he's under a myriad of questions from journalists, selected journalists who were there. I still have in studio my guest, Dr. Evans Agredako, is a Department of Political Science at the University of Ghana, Legon, and also a deputy senior tutor of the Legon Hall. Sir Cletus Dodono is an economist, also a public policy analyst, and the CEO and chairman of Claydot Consult. Gentlemen, now, I'll start off with you, Prof. Your general assessment of the questions and the answers that the president gave, did it meet your expectations before you heard him now?
Yes, largely so. At least briefing on the state of affairs as far as the sectors are concerned, and I'm extremely happy about the coverage on the economy, which his vice also threw more light on. Well, I think, however, in the area of the internal wranglings, I think the party itself has very strong structure. We may have to do more education to party members so that they are aware you cannot take the law into your own hand and do whatever you like without considering the manifesto that guides. And this goes to all the parties. Some of the fireworks and some even involving killing of fellow party members. The parties need to revisit, educate the people. We have processes, procedures that can help resolve some of those difficulties. Definitely, politically, it is always better to be able to resolve your difficulties rather than to let it
degenerate into something uncontrollable.
Type of
I want to play into your arena of comfort, the economy. He mentioned interest rates are going down just a bit, the inflation going down, and also the T-bill rates going down, and then the monetary policy rate as well going down. But then the only concern that the businessman out there who is watching us is interested in is how it also impacts on the cost of credit, the cost of capital from the financial institution. There is no corresponding reduction in that margin for them. And so yes, these successes have been chalked, but a lot of industry players are not happy because it doesn't clearly impact on them. It's not the case.
Yes, you really hit the nail on the head. Many things are going down in the financial sector, which means that there is some easing up. But look at the lending rates. They are still very high. And if you are thinking of sustainability, much of it is going to be driven by the success of the private businessmen. They will drive the sustainability. They will make the money. They will save it in the banks. They will buy shares. But if the cost of credit is so high,
absolutely, it just comes us to square one.
If we are coming all the way down to 11%, from all the way up from 26, 22%,
25, 26%, thereabout,
yeah.
now to 22.5.
And lending rates are still 35 up to 40%.
Very prohibitive.
But you see, one thing that we need, and if it is possible, a little bit of regulation of the financial sector, is that when lending rate is so high, it reduces financial intermediation.
Absolutely.
And it has a way of playing back on inflation.
Sure.
Inflation will begin, because it's a cost. And when businessmen incur such costs, and the productivity, the return, real return on their businesses do not come, they shift it to their products. So goods become more expensive. And in the long run, then the difficulties continue. I believe, and if you calculate what I normally call the spread between savings and lending, savings is between 4 to about 12%.
Thereabout.
That is the savings rate. And these are the people who surrender their money into the institutions without representation. They don't have board representation in the board room to air their voice. But let them come for loan, We are talking about 36%, 37%, 40%.
It's a clear disincentive, for business growth.
It reduces intermediation.
Absolutely. Dr. Evans, generally, and then I'll get into some specifics with you and then we'll round it up.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that this is a very healthy exercise. I indicated that governments have key responsibilities. Why? What am I talking about? They ought to represent our interests. Fundamentally, we have voted. When people queue to vote, they are choosing between policy, alternatives, and therefore they want to see some qualitative improvement in their lifestyles. That's why the economy is so fundamental. I mean, why are we in this world for? We need to chill. We must live in dignity. And so when we say that, look, we have a government, all that we are saying is that, look, there are certain things that we cannot do. Take up that responsibility. Let us play our role and make sure that we support the effort. And so in that process, there should be this accountability, dynamics, this responsibility dynamics, this transparency dynamics. And therefore, you would expect that once the government avails itself, fundamentally, what it means is that we are actually punching our way up as good boys as far as good governance is concerned. One of the fundamental principles will be that there should be a high level of transparency in the way things are done. And for me, when that is done, when we have this at regular intervals, it gives us a lot to chew. It puts what the government seeks to do, what I could call an implicit advantage for the government, is that the government then is setting the agenda. It has a lot of issues out there for public to actually debate, and that means that the government is setting the agenda for the nation, fundamentally.
With security, corruption, and those were some of the major low points going into this. Yeah. Did he address it adequately to your expectations?
Well, security is what we seek, and for us in political science, we think that law and order is a fundamental function of the state. We call it a minimal function. True. In fact, if the state cannot do anything at all, it should be able to provide some minimum security for its citizens. So that is why we spend so much money making sure that we build the capacity that we need to build. Machiavelli has argued that any nation, there are two things that he talked about: good laws and good arms. By arms, he's talking about security. That wherever there are good arms, good laws would inevitably follow. So what it means is that we need to have the good laws, we need to have the good arms, we ought to be protected, and that is what will give us the opportunity to be able to go about our normal business and so on. So yes, over the years, if you look at the trajectories, we've been building the capacity of the police to a very large extent.
But the IGP admits that they are heavily under-resourced.
Yes, we will continue to capacitate.
That's why they are unable to conduct, execute their mandate effectively.
Well, we
talk about, I mean, this what happened in La Paz. They were there without bulletproof jackets, running around on duty. Yeah. And some of them have died in the line of duty for very
we need to. These developments are unfortunate, and what we will say is that, look, we need to continue to build the capacity. I mean, it's interesting to note. I mean, what is true, and even less obvious, is that even as we develop, the more we develop, the more we encounter some of these crimes. Right. Because the development itself is a creator and destroyer of values, for instance. And sometimes as we develop, we have more sophisticated ways of dealing with some of these issues, and we need to build capacity of the security agencies. And I believe that the nation is very conscious of that. I don't want to say that when there's a transition, there seem to be some lapses. We need to have a similar transition. There should not be any vacuum so that people will take advantage of this situation and create problems for all of us.
Corruption. Yes. He addressed the boss bit and then other issues that came up within the 6 months period. His answers satisfied you?
Yeah, you reckon that over the years as an institute, as a country, there is something that we've been talking about, and that is official discretion, and the extent to which official discretion is sometimes abused. And that is why I believe in